Hey everyone in the VC, I'm back to do another George Harrison album review, and this will be the final George Harrison review. So, in case you don't know, I've been doing reviews of the solo Beatle albums in order of release. Did Paul McCartney's albums, and now I've moved on to George, and we're about to finish that up today. As far as John and Ringo, I'll get to them soon, I hope. I'm kind of thinking I might take a little break because there's some other bands and artists that I want to do reviews of. So I'm not sure if I'll sort of switch track and do some other people for a while and come back to Ringo and John, or if I'll just keep on and go straight through the Beatles. We'll see what happens. But anyway, with that, we come to the final George release, November 18th, 2002. Brainwashed came out, which unfortunately was his last album, and unfortunately came out after he had already passed away. So the album didn't do all that great chart-wise. It got to number 18 in America, number 29 in England. I think the fact that it was just under a year, is like 10, 11 months after he'd passed away, that the album finally came out. I don't know if it's the case if it just wasn't ready yet and they were still working on it and couldn't get it out any sooner. Had they been able to get it out, not to sound crass, but had they been able to get it out right before he died or right around the time that he died or just immediately after, I think it probably would have done a lot better chart wise. But then again, by 2002, the state of the music industry was pretty crap anyway, so who knows if it would have got any airplay or that much chart action even then. But you would like to hope that it would, but who knows. So yeah, this is my copy. This is an original vinyl copy. This was kind of hard to get for a while. The originals still are, because they went out of print pretty quick. So they were a little bit pricey, not ridiculous, but I think they were, I don't know what they're up to now, but when I got them, they were in the $30-$40 range. And it's since been re-released on vinyl, as has another of his albums, Live in Japan, which was very hard to find on vinyl. That was extremely expensive to find originals. I don't know what by putting out the re-release, how that's affected the price of originals, but this is an original. I was happy to get it. So Brainwashed, and of course we're all brainwashed by TV, I guess, is the idea behind that. And here's these mannequins or crash test dummies or robots or whatever standing around the TV. It's a gatefold album. When you open the gatefold, you get the shadow of the mannequins and a track listing of the songs. On the inside of the gatefold, this is, I guess this is just a picture of the grounds of Flower Park, I would assume. I'm not sure. So, I get the idea behind the cover, what's trying to say. I think it's an okay cover, but it's just okay. Not one of my favorite George album covers, or not one of my favorite album covers in general. But it's a nice, nice to have it, the original vinyl. And here was from the shrink wrap. That was the sticker, the hype sticker that came on it. So I kept that. Inside is the inner sleeve, which is just those crash test dummy things again. Not really that crazy about that, but I do like the record label. So there's side 1, which is pretty cool. Side 2 I like even more. I just like the light blue shade there on the Dark Horse label. And of course you've got the 7-headed horse. What's his name? You Panashades or something. I can't remember what that horse is called. But I always kind of like that label. So, and they don't have the track listing on either one. I think that's kind of cool. You have to look at the back of the album for the track listing. So you get that. And also inside you get this book, which has got, again, those mannequin things on the cover. Just some information there on the back. Inside you also have more, I don't know, weird pictures. There's a fish and there's something. Get lyrics to the songs, which is a good thing to have. And it also says who plays on what. You get more strange pictures of the mannequins, but the middle of the book, you get this, and this is and the one I'm about to show are, I think, two of my favorite pictures of George, post-Beatle pictures of George, and I don't know when that was taken, if that's toward the end of his life or earlier, but it's just a really good picture. It's him in Hawaii, I would assume, because he owned a place out there as well as living in England. And again, more mannequin pictures and lyrics. But here's sort of I always think of this as just sort of a George saying goodbye picture. I don't know. But I just think it's a really good picture. And again, I'm thinking that's probably in Hawaii because that doesn't look like England. And so, yeah. So you get the book with the lyrics, who plays on what, some neat pictures of George. So pretty good package on the album, I think. The album is it's an upbeat, happy album, but it's a sad album at the same time because it's George's last album. He passed away too soon at a pretty young age, 58 I think he was, and seems to be an album that people, it got good reviews. People seem to like it, but seems to me, and I could be wrong about this because I don't play it that often, and I really like this album, and I'm not sure why I don't play it that often. Maybe it's just you can't really listen to this without realizing that George was already passed away when it came out, and that he was making this when he was sick and dying, and so maybe that's part of it. But it seems to be an album that's a little bit overlooked, in my opinion. You hear people talking about George, and they're always mentioning Cloud 9, All Things Must Pass, his 70s work and so forth, but this one doesn't seem to get a lot of mention, and maybe that's the reason. Maybe it's just sort of even though it's a very good album, it's sort of a hard album to listen to if you're a Beatle or a George fan, because you really just, you can't listen to this without knowing that he passed away soon after he started on these songs, which actually these songs are go back, some of these go back, at least one of them goes back to 1988 or so. So these were songs he was writing between the late 80s and up to the time of his death. I'm not sure how late he was still writing songs. The big gap between this album and Cloud 9, like 13 years I believe it was. I could have my math wrong on that. It's not like George was doing nothing. He had the Wilburys project, he had the tour and the Live in Japan album, Beatles anthology. Of course, he had his illness to deal with. He also had some idiot that broke into his house and he got stabbed and attacked. So he had all of that to deal with. And he had a business manager in there somewhere that was embezzling money. So there was a lot of stuff going on in that 13 years between that. You wish that George would have been able to make some more albums, or I do anyway. But this is what we get. And it's really nice that his last album is, I think, one among his best, and it's a good album, and not because let's face it, everything that he released solo wise, some of it was a little poor, even though every album had its moments. But there's some kind of dogs in the discography there, and so it's good that he went out on a high note. And this is one that's up there, in my opinion, with the best of his solo work. So, what else? I wish, well, obviously he couldn't have toured with this album, but I mean, I'll just bring this up. I've mentioned it before. He did the Dark Horse tour back in '74, which didn't work out for him very well. He did the little few dates in Japan, which he seems to have had fun doing, and that was around 1990 or so, if I'm got my date right. But other than that, he really didn't do any touring, and I really had always wished that it's a shame that he was in a bad place in the Dark Horse days and didn't, this isn't the time to tour, let's wait till next year or the year after. Of course, he couldn't have toured this album, but I'm saying it's a shame he didn't tour instead of Dark Horse with 33 1/3 or the self-titled George Harrison album or the Cloud 9 album, because I think he would have had a lot, been in a better place, been in better voice, would have got a lot better reception, would have had a lot more songs to choose from, and especially Cloud 9, that would have been great, because 74 I was 10 or 11, depending on what time of year. But in 87, I was 23, 24, whatever. And he would have had a lot of songs to pick from. And it would have been interesting to see how he would have related to his Beatle past had he toured then too. Would he play Beatles songs or not, and so forth. Kind of getting off track here, but just kind of looking over George's entire solo career. Wish he would have done more rock and roll songs. I wish he would have done more Taxman, Don't Bother Me, It's All Too Much type songs. Not that he didn't do any in his solo career, and not that he didn't do a lot of great songs, because I love a lot of his ballads, and overall I'm a big fan of George's solo work. But you know, I do give him credit that he never really followed trends and never seemed to give a damn. He just did what he wanted, and you got to respect that and give him credit. And he seems to be, as far as I can tell, in a you know, he wasn't around when this album came out, but he seems to have been doing what he wanted on his last album, and he seems like he was having a good time making music again. So God bless him. There you go. Let's get into the album, because I can't think of anything else to say in general about it. Side 1 starts with Any Road, which was a single. In England, went to number 37, so again, didn't do too well. Great kind of a jaunty Celtic folk ballad with a slightly countryish feel is my take on the song. I like the sometimes you're cool, sometimes you're lame, and lyric line, which I think might just be a comment on life in general. You know, in our lives, everybody's lives at different times, we're in different places, and sometimes we're going along okay, and sometimes we don't know what the hell we're doing type thought, maybe. Religious overtones obviously to the lyrics, I think, but not beating you over the head with it. Just good, even if you're not religious, philosophical overtones, I guess. He's in a really good voice, but I think this song was one that he wrote back in 88, so I don't know when he recorded the vocal track, whether it was back in the 80s or the 90s, or whether it was in the early 2000s. But really good voice, and he plays guitar, and he also plays something called the banjolay, which adds a little bit of color and character to the song. Good opening track and a really good song. I'm going to give it a 9. Second song is P2 Vatican Blues, which George always, with religion, going back and forth and sort of soured on his Catholic upbringing, and was more obviously into Eastern religions and so forth later in life. And he always seemed to have on All Things Must Pass and here a little bit of fun you know, sort of sticking it to the Catholic Church type thing, which, you know, I don't know. But it's an okay song. I'm going to give it a 7 on Vatican Blues. Pisces Fish is the third song on side 1. It's just a sort of out for a walk one day, observing life in general and the mundane happenings of other people and what's going on outside. Kind of like the type of songs that Ray Davies, Paul Weller, and Paul McCartney, for that matter, write sometimes. A little bit out of character for George, but he does a really good job on it. I like the lyric, I've got to get off this big wheel, and I don't know if that's sort of a sideways glance reference to sideways reference to Watching the Wheels Go by John Lennon, maybe. But the gist of this song is sort of, it's easy to get distracted, but pay attention to what's important in life, which from his take is God and family and so forth. But it's a mundane but sweet and soothing song. Very nice. Again, he's in good voice. He's in good voice throughout this whole album, and I'm not sure. I'm thinking that the vocal tracks were probably recorded through the 13 or so years between his last album. So I don't think they were all done at once. But anyway, very good song. I can give it a 9. Number 4 on side 1, Looking for My Life, is sort of staring down mortality, because I'm sure while he was making these songs, he knew what was coming and was dealing with that through music. good lyrics. The song itself is just okay. I'm going to give that a 6.5. We move on. I think my picture is frozen on the video here, so you're probably just hearing my voice. Fifth song is Rising Sun, religious overtones again. Sort of the theme of it's easy to get lost in this world, but God's always available and keeps calling to you. So that's a nice thought. Nice slide guitar, hopeful sentiment, nice song. I'm going to give it an 8. Side 1 ends with an instrumental, Marwa Blues, which is sort of a Eastern but mainly Hawaiian, slightly spacey sounding song in some parts. Kind of sounds like Pink Floyd a little bit. Sad and majestic song, very beautiful. I think it George always had a love for Indian music. I'm going to give it an 8. Side 2 opens with Stuck Inside a Cloud. I don't know if this is George saying goodbye to us and his family and everyone. That's kind of what I get from the lyrics. But it's an upbeat sound. It's an upbeat song for that. It's a not a happy song, but it's at least upbeat, if that makes sense. Really like Stuck Inside a Cloud. I'm going to give that a 9. Second song, Run So Far, which is George facing his mortality again, no doubt knowing that the end is near. Even though he's singing in third person, I think it's George singing to himself. At least that's my thought on it. So the music is so-so on it. I'm going to give that song a 7. Number 3, Never Get Over You, which is obviously, or I would say obviously, a love song to Olivia. Very nice. The one criticism I have with the album is about this time, about this point, there's some of the songs, there's sort of a sameness, that redundancy that sort of creeps in. The songs are all really, really good. There's not a dog on this album, but some of the songs do sort of have the same vibe to them, and it gets a little bit redundant. But Never Get Over You is a nice love song for Olivia. I'll give it a 7. So number 4, Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea, which this or the last song may be my favorite on the album. But George didn't write this. This is a 1932 song that Cab Calloway did, and then after that a whole bunch of people have done it through the decades since. It was written by Harold Arlen and Ted Kohler. I don't know who they are, but it's a great song, and I think I had heard this before I heard George's version, if I remember right. I think he picked it because I think it perfectly sums up George's relationship to being famous, which the Quiet Beatle was never really that crazy about. I think he sometimes enjoyed fame on his own terms when he wanted it, but since when you're famous you don't have a choice most of the time. I wouldn't know, I'm not famous, but I'm saying I think that just sums up his attitude towards fame and the culture of celebrity. So yeah, I'd give that song a 10 if I didn't already say so. Rocking Chair in Hawaii is the 5th song on the side 2. It's George is singing like an old blues man, but you've got this Caribbean music backing him. Great vocal, one of my favorite of his vocals on this album, and again, I think his vocals are strong throughout this whole album. The musical chorus part gets a little annoying, but it's still a good song, and I'm going to give it a 6.5. Final song, album wraps up with Brainwashed, title song. Love the Indian music outro. That's a great way to end an album, given George's love of Indian music and culture and religions and so forth. Just a great message that how we're brainwashed and information overload in this day and age so much that sometimes it's hard to know what's up from down and right from wrong. And again, a nice little religious message in there if you're so in tune there. So yeah, I think it's a strong album to end on. I wish, like I said, I wish there would have been more. I wish George was still alive, because he was probably the coolest Beatle in my opinion, and be a toss-up between him and John as to who was the smartest and the cleverest and funniest. So he's very much missed, but this is a nice gift to give his fans and his family on the way out there. So overall I give it a 9, and that wraps up George. I don't remember if I said, but I have left out the Live in Japan album because I don't have it, and I did not get into the True Traveling Wilburys albums. I'm just going to review those separately somewhere down the road. So I'll be back with more reviews. It might be it might be John, it might be Ringo, it might be some other totally different somebody. Take care.